Hello, Great Canadian Bagel here with another Hot Take Tuesday. There's been a lot of talk about all the crises that are happening in the world, such as climate change, or more local crises such as the housing crisis or the affordability crisis. Climate change, though, is the biggest one, with people often talking about how the world is going to end or humanity is going to be wiped out. The tragedy here is that through all of these crises, the largest and most pressing crisis symptom, that of the fertility crisis, is being entirely ignored. Now, it's important to note the fertility crisis is a symptom. It's not that people are incapable of having children, but that they are choosing not to have children. That's the crisis. It's a symptom of much larger societal ills. But I'm here today to impress upon you that this is the most pressing crisis in not just Canada, but the world. Some cold, hard facts. Canada's population is approximately 38 million people as of 2021. 306,000 people die every year, and 344,000 births per year. This gives us, with a theoretical fertile female population of about 19 million, though many in that range are probably not particularly fertile, a total fertility rate of about 1.4. That is the essence of the crisis. That number, 1.4. Total fertility rate is the biggest, most important, most pressing number in the world. What does this number tell us? Well, in essence, whether you look at the religious worldview or the atheist, the entire purpose of life is procreation. If you are a Christian, a Jew, or a Muslim, it's simple. God tells you to go forth and multiply. Thus becoming your core imperative from God, and consequently, your core purpose if you are religious. If you are purely atheistic, then you still get to that conclusion. Because if you look at it purely from an evolutionary perspective, the only purpose of your genes is to further themselves. If your gene pool does not create progeny, then you are a failure. It's ironic that atheists have the lowest birth rate because even more so than religious people, atheists without children just admit that their genes are inferior and thus inferior people. In either case, both agree that children are the most important part of life. Your own well-being doesn't matter. How much wealth you have doesn't matter. Your job title doesn't matter. What matters is your kids. Look at single people in their 50s, 70s, 90s, etc. They almost always regret not having kids. Having kids is the core purpose for life. It is the core reason you do anything. What is the point with working hard at work, climbing the corporate ladder, or starting a business if it's just for your lifetime? There is none. Other than perhaps excessive pride of people talking about you after you're dead. Yet if you have no kids to benefit with these resources, what is the purpose? Why slave away all day in the widget factory for nobody? This is the important thing you must understand about this crisis. This isn't the case that people are voluntarily not having kids. It is the case of people being deluded into thinking that having kids is a chore, and in the case of people who want kids but cannot get resources. Now, in some cases, it is that people have been lied to on how much resources they will need. There's a myth that you need to be ready or in a fiscally stable position to have kids. It will never happen. If you wait until you're ready, you'll be 50 and childless. You will never be ready. If you wait until you're ready, you'll never have a job. If you wait until you're ready, you'll never get married. If you wait until you're ready, you will never have a house. You cannot wait until you're ready. You have to do it when you can. But these are myths that our school system propagates. I'm relatively young, 24. I remember high school, junior high, they would tell you to wait until you're ready. The creed and the idea of childlessness. You will never have kids if you wait until you are ready. But it is not just schools and misguided guidance counselors telling people to wait until they are ready, but it's a society that has built up the idea that kids are a drag, that they are a hassle, they are a drain of resources. You could go on a vacation. You could travel to exotic, faraway destinations. You could have all of the widgets in your house. But what is the purpose? Why have widgets? What good is it to waste your life playing video games, drinking alcohol, smoking weed, going on vacations to arbitrary locations, just to die alone? How fun are your 20s and 30s, but in your 60s and 70s, you have no kids, no spouse, and are alone, falling apart, slowly aging, until you die alone. Knowing that even if you won't admit it, that you are a failure. That is the life of childlessness. But the tragedy here and the crisis here in our society that we are all ignoring. No one is talking about this. Not a single politician will say it. Not one that this is a problem. They will wax on about how we need immigration to solve that gap. Well, look here. These are the countries that represent 50% of Canada's immigrants. All of them, except Pakistan in red and Philippines in this purplish color, are below replacement rate. Let's look at Canada. Again, this is Canada. Falling and stagnant. Replacement rate is all the way up here. Not even close. In the world, look at this. All the way down to 2.4 and trending down still. And there's no hope in any jurisdiction. Every single location, the fertility rate falls or is stagnant well below replacement. And NGOs and big Western governments do everything in their power to reduce fertility rates in countries. We fund abortions, we give them all sorts of birth control, and we flood them with propaganda that kids make life harder. That you have to work in the widget factory and be more productive widget makers because GDP. That's all these organizations care about. You think it's an altruistic belief in women's rights that champions abortion? No, it is the cynical, GDP-focused government desire to make women more productive workers. Study after study after study shows women get more joy on average out of raising their own kids. Not necessarily as a stay-at-home parent, but more often with kids cutting work, either entirely or going to part-time hours. They make less widgets. The GDP is not as big as there are fewer widgets. It's not any altruistic belief in women's rights. They don't care. All they care about is that if you take your child, your progeny, your only purpose in life, and you sacrifice them, you'll be a more productive worker. That is the core, hard truth to it. It's not an altruistic worldview. But even with that, even if every single abortion stopped, and not a single further child was sacrificed to the altar of GDP growth, our fertility rate still yet be 1.7. Better, but negative. What does that mean? This is a multi-layered problem, and there's not one solution, but if we do not start handling it soon, it will be a catastrophe. The modern world is built on the specialization of labor. People are really good and really knowledgeable on one small thing. 1,000 years ago, you couldn't do that. 1,000 years ago, you wouldn't have a professional engineer whose entire job is to go around overseeing the pouring of concrete. You wouldn't have an expert trained for years and years and years and years to do medicine. You'd have, likely, the wise old woman in town. That's what you got. Not a doctor who went to school for 12 years. The guy building a bridge, not an expert on bridges, but a generalist engineer who knows a little about all flavors of engineering instead of specializing in just bridges. Back then, an engineer learned every discipline. In 2022, the average engineer will learn one. You will be a chemical engineer who works on petroleum products. That's it. The fertility crisis threatens the entirety of our civilization. It is so pressing, so important, that there is no conceivable way that if we do not tackle it, that our current understanding of society will survive. If you drop the current population in half, the miracles of modern technology are unsustainable. That is why this is a crisis. It is multi-layered, multifactored, not easily solved on a global level. But even on the national level, it is unsustainable. Even if we ignore that our society needs a global market, even if we were a true autarky, it would be a catastrophe. Right now, we see about 380,000 net migrants, with a net birth rate of about 38,000, 10 times our birth rate. And our death rate goes up every single year. Though our raw births stay flat. What do we do when countries like China, India, the Philippines, the three largest sources of immigrants to Canada, realize they have negative birth rates or approaching as well? China, by all estimates, has a fertility rate sub 1. India, about 2, and the Philippines, 2.4. And, still noting, all three continue to drop. Where will the immigrants of 2040 come from? When China, the Middle East, India, South America, Europe, Africa have too few babies to replace their population. It won't just be that there'll be fewer young people to migrate to Canada, but it'll be countries in the world siphoning off the youth of these few countries who have a surplus. Our society is built on this facetious belief that we can sit here ignoring the fact that 49% of the population are not having kids, and we can just sit back and siphon the bright, the young, the mobile. But one day, they will not have them, and we will rue that day that we let our fertility rate plummet. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. This is a huge crisis, I would contend, much more so than climate change. Because no matter what climate change does, even the worst case scenarios, modern society could persist. If our fertility rate isn't solved, we will see catastrophic falling of population, and our modern society will be unsustainable. When we do not have the critical mass of people that allows for economically viable specialization, it won't exist. Think to yourself, in your own local communities, pretty much every town in Canada has a Tim Hortons. In fact, some larger towns may have dozens and dozens of them. A Tim Hortons needs very few people to survive because the average person consumes the products Tim Hortons sells frequently. But look at something like an Apple store, much more specialized, selling one type of comparatively low demand product. The average Apple store needs an area of roughly 500,000 people to sustain itself. If population falls dramatically, those stores will not exist. Think to all the specialized roles that exist. How many people does a pharmacy need? How many people do you need to have a major grocery store running? A Loblaws, a Sobeys? How many do you need? This is the crisis of our generation. It won't wipe out humanity, because people who do have kids average about 2.7, but about 49% are going childless right now. And you can bet most of them don't want to be. And anyone who says they don't want kids is probably deluding themselves. Even gay couples want kids. So they do the heterosexual person doesn't want to have kids? No. They've been deluded. Likely by not their own fault. But does it matter? If they have no kids, when their genes die. We shouldn't be panicking now. We should have been panicking 30 years ago. But that's what happens when politics only cares about GDP and not about people. It's all power games. And the kids, they don't help that. If you liked the video, by all means, like, share, subscribe to get this message out. Hopefully, if enough people can start talking about this, some politicians will notice. Not all politicians are terrible, but it seems only the terrible ones win. Let's try to change that. The change starts with you.